All right, so we are going to start building that farmer's market sign. I have got if you watch the latest video, then you know that we completed that. And enough that we still got to put in the cabinets, right? All the drawers. But we got the workbench top on and all leveled up. And we just mounted the scroll saw. Now we're gonna make that sign. So to make this sign, we're gonna use a backer. So this is what I got, just a scrap piece from the barn, been laying around forever. Squished grasshopper on the back. We need to square this up. I know this edge is not square. We need to square it. This is factory edge. You can still see it still has the blue marks. So we know it's good. This end is not, neither of the sides are square and obviously has a big L. I'm gonna cut that off. So we're gonna get a nice square piece. It'll probably be, when we're done, roughly 41 inches long and about 17 inches tall. Just working with what we got here. And then we're gonna do our framing from some of these. Just some 1x4s. But then that'll give us a lifted out raised edge. You can see that. So we'll router in a groove so that can go in there. Okay. And then we're gonna rip down a bunch of these cedar fence pickets. Okay. And then, so we'll probably rip them in half and then cut those at lengths that allow us to make tiles for herringbone. You need to have the width be the same as increments of the length in order to do herringbone tile properly. And then we'll stain that different colors. And then I've got a ton more of this. This is what we're gonna use to also, and I know a lot of scroll saw people use MDF board. So hopefully I'm not gonna regret using cedar fence picket instead. But we're gonna scroll saw off our farm name and everything on that, and then it'll mount over the herringbone, which will be glued down to that backer piece. So then we've got a 3-dimensional sign. So follow along and we'll see how this thing turns out. So to get this thing square, I used just my standard framing square here, and then took it off the one square edge, and then worked its way all the way around. And then laid on there that, I know I mentioned it in the cabinet video, which you guys won't have got to see yet. But this thing worked pretty good to do for anything smaller. The issues I had with it were when I started cutting things that were about 100 or, a full 8-foot sheet, so 96 inches. Dealing with under 4 foot, it actually worked pretty efficiently, and I was pretty happy with this one versus the other straight edge I bought that doesn't have built-in clamps like this does. So all in all, this one worked pretty good. It was pretty fast. There is a trick using a level and your table saw to cut up some square edges. But honestly, with the hassle that my table saw has been giving me lately, this seemed the best option. And then here I'm just giving a quick sand on all 8 vertices to make sure that there are no edges that could get stuck as we're trying to fit it in the router and joints that we'll get to make here in just a minute. Wasn't that bad. Nice and quick. And then we cut our trim pieces to length. We needed the four pieces that went around. Nice quick cuts. Tried to keep most of this stuff at about 30 seconds for these clips. Didn't figure that you guys cared to see too much of just me measuring and cutting. Here I went and did 45-degree angles for those. Dealt with some annoyance with my saw. Did not want to set at 45. I kept pulling it off and adjusting it. Not cooperating. And here we've got a 1/2-inch straight edge bit in the router to apply that channel where the
that backer board is going to go through. I need to, honestly, probably needed to sharpen that. Or, to be honest, actually, what I needed to do with this one was not run as deep of a cut in one go. So you can see it kind of bogged down, and I'm really kind of pushing and forcing that through. Typically with a router thing like this, especially slightly denser pine versus using that cedar, I should have made this in 2 passes. But I got lazy and just wanted to do it in one, so.
Alright, we've got it dry fit together. Got a 1/2 inch slot gone ahead just to be able to dry fit it together. Once we get the herringbone done and on it, because so what the easiest way to do this is to lay your herringbone on your flat surface, overhanging the edges, and then just trim to the edges. So that's why I said we just did that routed edge to get us started and to make sure my links and everything were all right. Because then what we'll do is we'll actually, once we get this made, I'll router this, the full thickness of that backboard, so that the trim hides any slight offness that may be on this. And so then I don't have to try to come back in a 1/2 inch on this and cut my herringbone. So, yeah.
So here we're ripping those cedar boards down to length or width. I do not have enough length in my shop to pass where the saw was to completely rip them in one go. So I actually had to rip half the board, slide it up and off, and then right there, flip the whole thing over, make the other cut on the same one, of course, and then run the other half through. So that was a little bit extra of work. I maybe could have gotten away with it if I'd have taken and put the extension cord on the table saw and ran it a little bit further out, but with how much stuff is laying over in the climbing wall area right now still, this was just kind of a hassle and not going to work. So this seemed the best option for the tight space that I had to deal with.
So we got that to the point where now we've ripped down these to 2.5 inches. The kicker with herringbone is that everything has to be in proportion. So like if you're doing 3/6 tile, 2/4 tile, 2/12 tile, 3/12 tile, whatever, it's got to be the narrow side has to be, or the long side has to be divisible by the narrow side. So we're doing 2.5 inches because those are 5.5 inch planks. And to make sure that we didn't have any off pieces, I just ripped them down to 2.5. One that makes my math later a little easier, but then 2 allows for a narrow strip to be pulled from the middle to ensure that there's no funkiness. Yeah, let's cut these down. We're gonna do 2.5 by 7.5.
So I do always double check myself, and I can't wait till I have a shop countertop that has an actual stop block mounted in it in a track. But the stop on, or the measure stop on my miter saw is actually fairly accurate, so I was able to get all these 7.5 inch cuts working with exactly the little stop that's on there and no issues, so that was handy.
All right, we're gonna run these through run them through the router, and I've already done it on 2 to check to see which thickness I like best, and give them a 1/4 inch round over. That way, when they sit together, there's a noticeable little bead there, versus beforehand, they'd sit together like this. So, I mean, if we're going to the word to make herringbone, right? We want it to show off. So even though we're going to stain, and that's really hard to see in the camera, but I don't know, compared to, all right, that's not very easy to show, but there's a definite noticeable difference between the two. You can see where they start. And we're gonna stain these different colors too. I've got some light and dark stains. So we're gonna do that, plus that. I'm pretty content with this size. I started with the 1/8 inch round over, and it was barely noticeable at all. And the 1/4 inch seems all right. I worry if I go up to the 1/2 inch round over, it'll just be excessive. So I think we're gonna stick with this.
This was honestly probably the most tedious part of the entire build was just sitting here running the roundovers on all four edges of all of these boards. I don't remember how many of these boards there were, but there were a lot. I feel like this step took absolutely forever. And then here was just laying them all out in that herringbone pattern, and then taking that square edge and lining it up with the board behind it, because there's always those little gaps that you can line up with. And then I take a pencil, mark along that straight edge, run them over to the chop saw, and then cut each one to fit. I have seen some people that what they'll do is they'll go ahead and glue everything down, and then they'll just run it across their table saw. So that might be an option for future attempts at this.
So we've got it all dry fit together and cut. So now all that remains is to stain it, and then glue it down, redo the widen up the trim we talked about earlier, so that it can fit fully into these. Yeah, and then pop that trim together on it, stain it whatever color I decided to stain it, and then we need to do the actual words. But we're almost done with the back part.
So this part is the part that worried me the most. I was so scared that I was accidentally going to get some of this dark walnut color on those lighter boards. Thankfully we didn't. And I actually had two colors I could have gone with that lighter color, a red chestnut or a southern pecan. And I really think that going with that southern pecan was the right choice. That red chestnut was quite a bit darker and really didn't contrast with that walnut.
All right, she's coming together. I just set the trim here to kind of help me push all the pieces back in line a little bit better, but so they're not in place and they haven't been routed yet. So I got the wider router groove. So I still got to do that. So we went with dark walnut and southern pecan as our two colors. I really think they pop. And then I think we'll do Green Thicket Farm, established 2016, in probably green paint, honestly. Like, we'll just paint those green, and that ought to really pop and help stick with our colors. I need to draw out Green Thicket Farm 2016 now, in order to be able to start cutting it. So I'm gonna work on that. All right, so I put down, this is just one that had no knots on it, piece of that cedar. Put tape on it to draw easier and to mark out a grid. Okay, see the grid? So then I took my logo on Canva, put it on a piece of graph paper on Canva, so that then I could follow these grid lines to try and match the same font that is already our logo. So then I'll drop stuff. We'll cut it all out and it'll go on there like that. Just the individual letters. They'll glue down to that, or air nail. And then I still need to do the farms part and EST 2016. But I'm running out of time before I need to go teach a class and go pick up Way. So I'm gonna try to cut a few of these letters. This is my first time actually using a scroll saw. I cut this test piece to see how ridiculous it was, and not that bad. Not insanely easy, but not that bad either. So yeah, I'm going to cut individual letters off as best I can on the chop saw to try and make so I have more room to move around. And then we'll hop to it. I'm going to try to angle you guys up and over that. It's not going to be very easy with the tripod that I have, but we're going to give it a go. I was actually pleasantly surprised with how much easier and intuitive that this actually was, especially since I really didn't think that first little tiny G I made turned out very well. But I think most of these letters turned out good. I only broke one letter while actually working on the scroll saw. It's the R, I'll tell you here in a little bit. I'm using the voiceover feature in iMovie right now, and I don't know, it seems to be nice. It feels like I'm able to give you guys some more details while still allowing us to skip through some of the boring parts by speeding up the videos here. I hope that you guys find this helpful, or at least more helpful than me just running background music, or what I've done in a lot of other videos, when it just being silent and
you guys just sitting there in silence watching a video. Although I notice I am saying a lot as I try to fill this empty space. But yeah, hopefully it's more beneficial to you. I did get a little spooked. Some of these ones that were a little closer, especially as I was doing like the established 2016, those letters were so tiny. And I realized that what I should have done on those, and even like the I just did there, I should have left more of the surrounding board attached and cut it out inside it and then popped it out like that G that you saw that was the first attempt I did. Because then that made it to where there was a little bit more support. Some of those ones, they just kind of bounced funny, and that was a little sketch. So we've got to drill a couple of holes to be able to get the blade inside the inner part here. Otherwise, we got no way to get inside that. That should be the only hole I need, though. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually cut these bottom letters off first. I didn't want to attempt to squeeze this onto the chop saw, so we're going to go ahead and just kind of cut that all out, and then we can cut individual letters, and then we'll cut this whole thing out. Yeah. I have not figured out how to get this thing to blow air. So it's supposed to blow air to help keep everything off me. So routinely in the time-lapse video, you'll just see like, oh, it's clean. Oh, it's clean. That's me having to stop like every few minutes and going, and the time-lapse just doesn't catch me blowing on it. Every few seconds, to be honest. I almost thought I was hyperventilating last night trying to blow everything off. So if any of you know, I mean, I'll probably just watch a video on it later, but if any of you just do scroll saw work and know how to get that thing to jet on a Porter cable, let me know. I don't know if maybe I don't think it's the vacuum. I guess we could try that, but then it's going to be stupid noisy. Yeah, I'll hook up my shop vac to this. The problem is this is a very narrow dust collection port, although actually that's filling up quite a bit, so I better try and do that. I'm going to hook up the shop vac to it. I'm going to have to like tape it funny down here, so hopefully it's not just in my way. We'll see. So this was a pretty bad mistake here. I did not realize how bad that was going to vibrate the tripod. I'm glad that I stopped and double checked it when I did. So that really I only made the two outer little cuts there before noticing what was happening to it, and then moved it up to the little windowsill with the HVAC unit there. That was mounted to the wall instead of to the actual workbench. And stayed pretty stable. I didn't notice when I was looking back over the footage any serious vibrations on that. Some of the other angles that I was filming it from, it still had my tripod. I thought I was using the tripod for filming some other reels when I was doing this one, so I didn't have it. But the other ones, I'd had it just on the tripod on the ground. This was actually just a piece of galvanized pipe with a funky little wraparound phone holder stuck on the end of that with a flange on the bottom of the galvanized pipe. So very janky, but it got me through finishing filming this and actually worked a little better than our Pivo for getting some of these downward angles. I've been looking at getting a Canva tripod. They're pretty great. They got a background light and everything, and they do all sorts of fun angles and could be great for the shop. Only issue that I have found with it and what stopped me from doing it is it either needs to clamp to something or it has a big wooden base, and I think if I get one, I'm going to destroy some of the base features just so that I can make it to where I can mount it to something or thread it onto an actual tripod. Yeah, there's a few other things I'd like to change about it if I do wind up getting one of those to make it so I think it'll actually be functional. It has way more features than my current tripod does, except for the fact that the Pivo has that AI feature that follows me while I'm working. So that's insanely handy, but for working in the shop, that's not as useful as being able to bend. And the Pivo can't do that. The Pivo is just a vertical filmmaker. As far as the scroll saw here, this was not bad at all once you really got it figured out. Like I did in a little note there, I figured out how the blow works. As that arm goes up and down, it runs the bellows, and that blows out, keeps the dust off. That was really nice. Stopped the hyperventilating. And then it took forever to figure out how to get that little blade off. This scroll saw, for some reason, did not come with an instruction manual, so that made figuring out how everything worked and what I was supposed to be doing a little bit difficult. But thank you to YouTube videos and people answering what seemed like obvious questions in YouTube videos, because honestly, I'd have been lost without some of them describing how that bellows works and how to change the blade on this model. And even then, it still is kind of a nuisance. You gotta loosen the press down lever and then raise it up, move everything around, untwist the clamp, and then pull up the release on there. So there's like 3 different steps to pulling the blade out, and you have to pull that blade out every time you need to go into a hole to make an interior cut. So that was kind of a hassle, as well as, you know, drilling a hole in your piece of work first so you have somewhere for the blade to go. And this is one of the styles that has the prongs, so you had to drill a pretty good sized hole. Here we're just going through and sanding off the face so that it's a little bit flat. You know, that cedar, they're just cedar pickets, so they're pretty rough. And then going through and sanding all the edges down so that it had a little bit of a round over, same as the herringbone did. But obviously we couldn't run this across the router. That wasn't going to work at all. That took forever to sit there and hit each and every one of those little pieces. I definitely like the ones I did towards the end more than the first one, so I did go back and resand a couple of those first letters. And then here we're just putting out an insane amount of glue over this board and then transferring them up and over. Unfortunately, the camera stopped filming once I got the glue on and mostly spread out, so you won't get to see me stacking them on there, but it's really just putting them on and then weighing them down with boards on top to give a flat level surface, and then like every bag of salt and thin set and mortar that I have laying around in my shop. This is the color green. It's the same color green that we have on our shutters and on our door on our farm, so it seemed like a pretty nice fit for what our logo should be. And there they are. All the nice pretty painted pieces for the sign. And here is the sign sans that trim with all those pieces getting ready to be glued on. I left the same distance of the trim, so 3.5 inches on top, 3.5 inches on bottom, and 3.5 inches on the sides with that farm piece in the middle. We glued them on with that Titebond 3 glue, same as the herringbone. I used that battery as a little bit of a weight to get me started, so that as I'm working through, there's a little bit of pressure. And we laid everything out beforehand to make sure that we knew exactly where everything was going to go, where center was, and then sanded down those trim edges. I don't think I filmed it, but we did router them a little wider. Here you can see that that's that full width that it needed to be to fit over the glued on edges. After we took the battery off, we did run over and put down weight on all of those letters to put all those bags back on top and weight them down. Here I'm using that chestnut, that red chestnut stain that I didn't want because it didn't pop with the walnut, as a nice intermediate for the trim. I thought that pretty well matched. We got it dry fit, pulled it back off, and then started working our way through gluing and clamping. And then just tons of clamps, to be honest. And then we did the air nailer and then clamped it on the bottom. And here we go at the farmer's market, nice and complete. Thank you guys so much for making it this far into the video. Remember that if you like this content, to hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you, folks.